welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Or, I might show up at your door. I'm just here to share some creepy stories, so sit back and enjoy. Disclaimer: the content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. Lookout Station Log, Willamette National Forest. Entry number 137, April 12, 2025. 3 months into my winter posting at Broken Ridge Lookout, and I'm starting to understand why they had trouble keeping someone in this position. The isolation doesn't bother me. It's why I took the job. After 8 years of city noise and people's constant demands, the silence of these ancient forests was supposed to be a balm. But silence isn't what I've found here. The forests of Oregon aren't silent. They're whispering. I first noticed it 2 weeks ago during routine radio checks with bass. A subtle aberration in the static, a rhythm that didn't belong. I adjusted the equipment, checked the wiring, and even hauled the backup radio from storage, but the anomaly persisted. Not constant, but recurring. Like something breathing between frequencies. Today it changed. 0700 hours. Standard morning check-in with Ranger Command. Clear transmission, no anomalies. 0943 hours. First irregularity. While scanning for weather updates, Channel 7 picked up what I initially documented as wind interference. Listening more carefully, the sound had structure, almost syllabic though unintelligible. Duration: 47 seconds, 1,216 hours. Second occurrence during scheduled check-in. This time command heard it too. Supervisor Jenkins suggested atmospheric bounce from a distant station. The interference overlapped our transmission with what sounded like multiple voices speaking simultaneously at different speeds. I've uploaded the recording to my personal drive. Something about it makes my skin crawl. 1,422 hours. While conducting exterior maintenance on the tower's weather instruments, I noticed unusual bird behavior. A complete absence of calls within approximately 300 yards of the lookout, despite visual confirmation of several species typically vocal this time of year. The silence felt observed. I'm documenting this officially because I need to maintain some professional distance from what's happening. Off record, I'm unnerved. I've spent enough time in wilderness to recognize when something is wrong. The forest feels different. Alert. Aware. Lookout Station Log, Willamette National Forest. Entry number 138, April 13th, 2025. Slept poorly. Dreams filled with static and whispers. Woke at 0317 hours to the emergency alert system activating on my personal phone. The standard alert tone played, but the message displayed only as blank space. When I tried to access the alert history, no record existed. 0630 hours. Delayed morning check-in due to dense fog conditions. Visibility reduced to less than 30 feet. Radio transmission quality degraded. Significant static overwhelming the channel. Jenkins barely audible through the interference, but I clearly heard another voice beneath his. Not speaking to me, not speaking English, but present on the line. Jenkins denied hearing anything unusual when I asked. 0855 hours. Fog persists. Completed perimeter check despite limited visibility. Found unusual markings on 3 Douglas firs approximately 200 yards from the lookout's eastern approach. Patterns resembling concentric circles with vertical lines bisecting them. Too precise to be natural, too weathered to be recent. Photographed and logged in the station's biological survey database. 1,043 hours. Radio erupted with emergency broadcast signal while I was cataloging the tree markings. No alert message followed, only 18 seconds of what I can only describe as whispering. Multiple voices, layered and echoing. Recording system captured nothing but static when I reviewed the logs. I called command immediately after. Jenkins confirmed no emergency alerts had been issued. I'm beginning to question the reliability of the equipment. Or myself. 1,342 hours. A hiker arrived at the station, unexpected, as this trail isn't heavily trafficked, especially this time of year. Casey Winters, local guide. Early 30s, weathered face, clearly comfortable in the backcountry. Said they were checking trails after the winter for an upcoming guided expedition and wanted to report unusual wildlife behavior. According to Winters, deer and elk herds are moving abnormally, avoiding certain sections of forest despite abundant forage. When I mentioned the radio anomalies, Winters grew noticeably tense, asked very specific questions about what I'd heard. Voices or just one voice? They asked. Do they repeat phrases or is it random sounds? When I described the whispers, Winters nodded like this confirmed something. Before leaving, they wrote down a frequency 91.7 and told me to monitor it during the next 3 nights between midnight and 3 a.m. No explanation offered, despite my pressing. The old-timers called them speaking groves, Winters said at the door. Places where the forest talked back. My grandmother warned me about them as a kid. Thought it was just stories until I heard it myself last autumn. I asked what it was. The forest broadcasting, Winters replied. Some say it's been trying to warn us for generations. Most can't hear it. Some technology picks it up though, radios especially. The frequencies are changing now, getting stronger. After Winters left, I found myself standing at the window for nearly an hour, watching the tree line as the fog finally receded. The forest looked exactly as it should, vast, primeval, indifferent to human concerns. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling of being scrutinized in return. 1927 hours. Sunset brought deteriorating weather conditions. Wind gusts reaching approximately 35 miles per hour. Through the howling, the emergency alert system on the station's radio activated again. This time, a voice, mechanical yet organic somehow, repeated one phrase before dissolving into static. The roots hear you breathing. I've officially reported the alert system malfunction to command. Jenkins is sending a technician tomorrow to check the equipment. I haven't told him about 91.7 FM. I haven't mentioned Casey Winters or Speaking Groves. 2,240 hours. I've set up a personal recording device to monitor the emergency broadcast frequency overnight. The wind has died completely. The sudden silence feels expectant, like the forest is holding its breath. Outside my window, the darkness between the trees seems deeper than usual. The dim safety lights around the lookout's perimeter don't penetrate as far as they should. I keep seeing movement at the corner of my vision, but when I turn, there's nothing but perfectly still branches. I should sleep, but I won't. Not yet. At midnight, I'll tune to 91.7 as Winters suggested. I've been a ranger for 12 years. I've never feared the wilderness, respected it certainly, but never feared it. Tonight, listening to the absolute silence where insect sounds and night birds should be, I feel something I haven't experienced since I was a child afraid of the dark. The forest is awake, and it knows I'm listening. End of days log. Ellis Mercer, Broken Ridge Lookout, Willamette National Forest. Personal note: if something happens to me, tell them about frequency 91.7. Tell them about Casey Winters, and tell them what I'm only admitting here. The whispers in the static aren't random noise. They're repeating coordinates. The same sequence over and over. They're giving directions to something deep in the oldest part of the forest. And God help me, tomorrow I'm going to follow them. Lookout Station Log, Willamette National Forest. Entry number 139, April 14th, 2025. I should begin by stating that what follows is my official account. The facts as I observe them. The Ranger Service deserves that much, at least. 0127 hours. I tuned to 91.7 FM as Winters suggested. For 30 minutes, nothing but soft static. Then, at precisely 0200, the static organized itself. No other way to describe it. Random noise suddenly possessing structure, like 1,000 whispers synchronizing into a singular voice. It spoke 4 words, clear as day, Listen to the roots, then silence again. I waited until 0300. Nothing further. 0730 hours. Overslept. No dreams that I recall, which feels significant given recent nights. Morning check-in with command delayed. Jenkins sounded concerned but accepted my excuse about equipment checks. I didn't mention last night's broadcast. The coordinates from yesterday's whispers point to a location approximately 4.7 miles northeast of the lookout. Cross-referenced with our forest survey maps, it's an old-growth section, never logged, minimum human interference. Several hiking trails skirt it, but none penetrate the center. Terrain features suggest a natural bowl formation, possibly containing a seasonal marshland. I should report this. I should wait for the technician. I'm doing neither. 1021 hours. En route to coordinates. Standard patrol equipment plus extra communications gear. Weather conditions optimal, clear visibility, light breeze, 54 degrees Fahrenheit. Spring foliage emerging but understory still navigable. Marked my route on the station's tracking system, though I logged the destination as a routine watershed check. 1155 hours. Approaching the perimeter of the target area. Radio functionality deteriorating progressively over the last mile. Signal strength indicator shows full reception, yet transmission quality degrading. Command barely audible through intensifying static when I attempted scheduled check-in. Notable environmental changes. Decreased bird activity. No visible mammals despite optimal foraging conditions. Vegetation displays unusual growth patterns. Trees leaning inward toward my destination rather than competing upward for sunlight. The silence feels physical here, like pressure against my eardrums. Field notes handwritten. April 14th, 2025, 1,340 hours. Radio completely non-functional now. Not even static, just dead air across all frequencies. GPS still operational but sluggish. Battery indicator dropped from 94% to 38% within minutes despite full morning charge. I've reached the coordinates. Standing in what appears to be a perfect circle of Douglas firs, approximately 120 feet in diameter. The trees forming this circle are massive, at least 300 to 400 years old by my estimation. Growth patterns uniform in a way that's statistically improbable in nature. Center of the circle contains a depression about 20 feet across. Soil looks disturbed, recently. No footprints other than mine. At the depression's center, a single sapling, species unidentifiable, with pale, almost translucent bark. The ground around the sapling is etched with the same concentric circle pattern I found on trees near the lookout. The markings pulse with subtle bioluminescence when shadowed, a phenomenon I can't scientifically explain. I'm recording soil and bark samples for analysis. Something about this place feels wrong. The air tastes metallic. My watch stopped at 1307. Lookout station log, Willamette National Forest. Entry number 140, April 14th, 2025. Continued. 1,727 hours. Returned to station. Technician Sarah Okonkwo arrived during my absence. Found her examining the radio equipment with visible confusion. "This system is functioning perfectly," were her first words to me. "But it shouldn't be picking up anything on these frequencies. They're reserved bands." I showed her my logs of the anomalies. Her expression changed recognition, not disbelief. When pressed, she admitted similar reports had come from 3 other lookout stations in a triangular pattern across the Willamette Forest over the past month. "Management is calling it atmospheric interference," she said. "I'm not supposed to discuss it." I showed her the soil samples. The bioluminescent quality had intensified since collection. Under her pocket microscope, the soil contained thread-like structures unlike typical mycelium networks. More organized, almost geometric in arrangement. Okonkwo's demeanor shifted from professional curiosity to unmistakable alarm. She made a call on her personal phone rather than the station equipment, speaking too quietly for me to hear. 20 minutes later, She packed her gear with unusual haste. "Someone else is coming tomorrow," she said at the door. "A specialist. Don't discuss what you found with anyone else, especially not command." When I asked why, she hesitated before answering. "Because they already know, Ranger Mercer. They've known for months. The alerts aren't malfunctions." After she left, I examined the station's radio again. A new frequency had been programmed into the system, 162.7 MHz, labeled only as EAS override. 1942 hours. Power fluctuation throughout the station. Lasted approximately 47 seconds. When systems restored, every electronic device with a speaker simultaneously activated with the emergency alert tone. The message that followed was not the standard automated voice. Root systems expanding. Communication nodes established. Awakening imminent. Remain at listening posts. It repeated 3 times before terminating. My phone shows no record of an emergency alert being issued. The station's log, however, recorded the broadcast as originating from the Forest Service's Regional Emergency Management Center. 2013 hours. Received unexpected video call from Dr. Vivian Chun, identified as USFS research scientist. Never met her before. She asked detailed questions about the anomalous radio transmissions, specific frequencies, duration patterns, content of whispers. Her manner suggested she already knew the answers, was merely confirming details. "Have you experienced any symptoms since the exposures began?" she asked. "Headaches, auditory hallucinations outside of radio contact, unusual dreams, sleepwalking?" I admitted to disturbed sleep patterns and a recurring dream of walking among trees that whispered in human voices. Her reaction was clinical interest rather than concern. "The research team will arrive at 0800 tomorrow," she said. "Secure all samples and recordings. Document any further anomalous transmissions. And Ranger Mercer, don't return to that clearing." When the call ended, I noticed a message had been sent to my phone during our conversation. The sender field showed only a series of coordinates, identical to those I'd followed today. The message contained a single line: "The specialist is not your ally. 2240 hours. Attempted to tune to 91.7 FM again." Instead of whispers, a clear voice, synthetic but distinctly female, recited what sounded like a poem or incantation. "Beneath the soil, between the roots, the ancient network slowly reboots. What sleeps below will soon awake. The forest speaks. The earth will shake." It repeated on a loop for exactly 7 minutes before the frequency returned to static. I've locked the soil samples in the station's specimen freezer. The bark sample from the pale sapling has begun to develop the same markings I found on the trees near the station. Concentric circles that seem to expand when not directly observed. The forest is changing. Or perhaps it's always been this way, and something is simply allowing us to perceive it now. Either way, I don't trust Chin. I don't trust Command. Tomorrow morning, before the research team arrives, I'm calling Casey Winters. Local knowledge might be more valuable than government science if we want to understand what's happening here. Because I'm increasingly certain of one thing: these aren't random anomalies. The forest of Oregon is trying to tell us something, and I'm afraid of what happens when it stops whispering and starts to scream. End of day's log. Ellis Mercer, Broken Ridge Lookout, Willamette National Forest. Lookout Station Log, Willamette National Forest. Entry number 141, April 15th, 2025. 0632 hours. Awoke to find the station's emergency alert system active. Screen glowing but silent. Message displayed read: "Signal integrity compromised. Human intervention detected." Cleared when I approached the console. I called Casey Winters at the number they left. No answer, but a text message arrived moments later. "Meet at Eagle's Crest. 0730. Come alone. No electronic devices." Eagle's Crest is a rock formation approximately 1.2 miles west of the station. Easily defensible position with clear sight lines. Strategic choice for a meeting. 0714 hours. Before leaving, I examined the soil samples from yesterday. The specimen freezer had malfunctioned overnight, internal temperature reading 78 degrees Fahrenheit despite settings at -4 degrees Fahrenheit. The samples had transformed. What was soil now appears to be a dense network of fibrous, pale green filaments pulsating in perfect synchronization. Under magnification, the filaments form patterns identical to the markings on the trees. I've secured the samples in the station's hazardous materials container and applied isolation protocols. 0743 hours. Arrived at Eagle's Crest to find Winters already waiting. They were using an ancient-looking compass and paper maps rather than GPS. When asked why, Winters simply said, "Old ways don't get corrupted." Winters confirmed what I'd begun to suspect. The phenomena occurring in Willamette Forest aren't new, just intensifying. According to local indigenous oral histories Winters has documented, certain sections of the forest have always been speaking places, where the trees communicated with each other and occasionally with humans deemed receptive. My grandmother's people had a name for it, Winters explained. Roughly translates to the thinking root. They believed the oldest trees were connected underground by something that dreamed and sometimes shared those dreams through the trees. What's changed, according to Winters, is the desperation. The whispers becoming broadcasts, the subtle becoming overt. Something is waking up, they said. And it's terrified. 0915 hours. While returning to the station with Winters, we discovered more marked trees. Dozens of them forming a perfect line pointing toward the coordinates I visited yesterday. The markings were fresh, the bark still seeping sap around the carved patterns. Winters traced the symbols with weathered fingers. Warning markers, they explained. Old stories say they appear when the forest is trying to establish boundaries. Keep people away from something. I asked what they thought that something might be. Winters stared at the direction the trees were indicating. Stories called it the sleeper beneath. Said it dreamed the forest into being. Said one day it would wake and unmake what it made. As we stood there, every emergency alert system within range simultaneously activated. My phone, Winters' older flip phone, even ancient battery-powered weather radios in Winters' pack. The same mechanized voice from previous alerts spoke through all of them. Containment protocols failing. Root systems breached. Awakening at 37%. Winters didn't seem surprised, just resigned. It's been sending warnings like this for months. Getting stronger. More frequent. 1047 hours. Returned to find Dr. Chun and a 3-person team already at the station. They brought sophisticated monitoring equipment and were installing sensors along the perimeter. Chen's demeanor was stern, professional, but her eyes betrayed anxiety when she saw Winters. "You're the local guide," she said. "Not a question. The one who's been documenting the audio phenomena." Winters nodded but said nothing. Chun dismissed her team with a glance before addressing us both. "I need to know exactly what you've encountered. No official reports, no scientific jargon, just the truth." I described everything, including the circle of trees and the transformed soil samples. Winters added context from local knowledge, generations of stories about speaking groves, and warnings to avoid certain areas where the roots run deep. Chun listened without interruption, then opened her laptop to show us thermal imaging surveys of the forest taken over 6 months. What appeared was shocking. A vast network of heat signatures beneath the soil, arranged in geometric patterns too precise to be natural. The network expanded with each new survey, with the density centered exactly at the coordinates I'd visited. "We thought it was geothermal activity at first," Chin explained. "Then fungal networks. Now we're not sure what it is, but it's growing. And it's producing patterns we've started finding on trees across the Pacific Northwest." She showed us more images. Identical circular markings documented on trees from Northern California to the Canadian border, all appearing within the last year. All aligned toward specific coordinates, forming a massive geometric pattern visible only when mapped from above. The U.S. Forest Service officially attributes this to environmental activists, Chun said. Unofficially, we know that's not true. The markings appear overnight in areas with no human access, and they're carved from the inside out. She let that sink in before continuing. 3 weeks ago, the emergency broadcast system began experiencing what we called localized malfunctions, isolated alerts in remote areas. As of yesterday, these malfunctions have occurred simultaneously across 6 states. 1,215 hours. Our conversation was interrupted by all communication devices simultaneously broadcasting an alert. Warning. Quarantine zone established. Willamette sector designated containment priority 1. Military assets deployed. Chen's team burst into the room, reporting that drone surveillance showed National Guard vehicles moving on forest access roads toward our location. They weren't supposed to intervene yet, Chen whispered, more to herself than to us. To her team, accelerate deployment of the monitoring array. We need baseline readings before they establish the perimeter. To Winters and me, the military presence is a precaution, nothing more. Winters' expression darkened. You're lying. You know what's happening, and you're scared. Chun hesitated before answering. What I know is that something is using our emergency alert systems to broadcast warnings about itself. What I know is that every tree within a 1,000-mile radius is being marked with symbols we can't decipher. What I know is that soil samples like the ones Ranger Mercer collected have appeared at 27 sites, and each sample contains DNA structures we cannot identify. She looked from Winters to me. If you want the truth, help us understand what we're dealing with before they shut us down and implement their own solutions. 1,430 hours. Lieutenant Marcus Reeves arrived with a 4-person military team. Unlike Chen's research group, they came armed and immediately established security protocols around the station. Reeves himself, tall, composed, with the measured movements of someone trained to reveal nothing, inspected Chen's monitoring equipment with obvious skepticism. Doctor, your authorization extends to observation only, he reminded her. Any anomalous activity is to be reported directly to command, not independently investigated. When Chun introduced Winters and me, Reeves assessed us with clinical detachment. The civilian should be escorted beyond the containment zone, he said, as if Winters weren't standing right there. The ranger stays as facility liaison. Before anyone could object, every electronic device in the station activated simultaneously with the emergency broadcast tone. Even Reeves' military-grade radio emitted the alert. The message was different this time. Longer, more specific. Awakening process at 43%. Human defensive measures detected. Warning. Aggressive intervention will accelerate emergence. Forest integrity compromised. In the silence that followed, Reeves spoke quietly into his radio. His team immediately moved to secure the samples I'd collected. New orders, he announced. This station is now under military authority per National Security Directive 2551. All civilian personnel will surrender communication devices and prepare for evacuation. Chun protested, citing scientific imperative. Winters simply stepped away from the soldiers, moving closer to me. When the team approached to collect my radio, I noticed something none of the others seemed to see. Faint lines appearing on the backs of their hands as they reached toward me. The same concentric circle pattern, visible just beneath the skin. 1945 hours. I'm writing this quickly before transport arrives. They're evacuating everyone except Reeves' team from the 5-mile radius around the coordinates. Chun is being taken to a research facility. Winters managed to slip away during the confusion. I suspect they know these forests well enough to evade military patrols. I've been ordered to regional headquarters for debriefing. Before confiscating my electronics, Reeves allowed me this final log entry. His exact words, "Make it accurate. This is now a matter of national security." What he doesn't know is that I've seen the markings appearing on his skin too. Whatever is happening in this forest isn't contained by military cordons. It's spreading through contact, through proximity, through the very air we breathe. As I pack, The emergency alert system has activated one final time. The message on screen is different. Directed, personal, Ellis Mercer. You have been selected as witness. The roots remember you. The forest has been whispering. Now it knows my name, and I fear it's done trying to warn us. End of days log. Ellis Mercer, Broken Ridge Lookout, Willamette National Forest. Audio transcription debriefing session. Regional Headquarters, Portland, Oregon. April 16, 2025. Interviewer. State your name and position for the record. Mercer, Ellis Mercer. Senior Park Ranger, Willamette National Forest, Broken Ridge Lookout. Interviewer. Ranger Mercer, I need you to walk through the events at Broken Ridge chronologically, with particular attention to the anomalous communications you documented. Mercer, I've already provided my logs. They contain everything. Interviewer, indulge me. Start with the first instance of radio interference. Mercer, sigh, it began with subtle patterns in the static, rhythms that shouldn't exist in random noise. Then words became audible, whispers at first, then clearer transmissions. The emergency alert system started activating with messages about something waking up beneath the forest. Interviewer, and you believed these transmissions were authentic emergency alerts? Mercer, at first I thought it was equipment malfunction, but after Dr. Chun confirmed similar phenomena at other stations. Interviewer, Dr. Chun shared classified information with you? Mercer, she showed me thermal imaging of whatever's growing under the forest. The network of whatever it is. She seemed to think I might have insights because I'd been experiencing the phenomena firsthand. Interviewer, did she mention Project Rootline?
Mercer, no.
What's Project Rootline? Interviewer, tell me about Casey Winters. Mercer, local guide, knows the forest better than anyone. Has family connections to indigenous communities with oral histories about the forest. Communicating. Interviewer, and Winters encouraged you to visit specific coordinates where you found the circular clearing? Mercer, no. I found those coordinates in the radio transmissions before meeting Winters. They just confirmed the significance. Interviewer, pause. Ranger Mercer, are you currently experiencing any unusual symptoms? Headaches, auditory hallucinations, visual disturbances? Mercer, why do you ask? Interviewer, it's a standard question. Mercer, no, it's not. You're looking for something specific. The same thing Dr. Chun asked about. The same thing Lieutenant Reeves was watching for when his team started showing the markings on their skin. Interviewer, what markings? Mercer, the concentric circles. They were appearing on the soldier's hands, just beneath the skin, like something was drawing them from inside. Recording ends abruptly. Personal Journal, Ellis Mercer. April 17, 2025. They're keeping me at the regional headquarters under medical observation, though no actual medical staff have examined me. My debriefing was terminated when I mentioned the markings on Reeves' team. The interviewer left immediately and 2 security personnel escorted me to this isolation room.
No windows.
Door locked from outside. They've taken all my electronics except for this old laptop that can't connect to any networks. They claim it's for my continued documentation of my experiences. I know what this really is. Containment. I've been trying to sleep, but every time I close my eyes, I see the forest from above. Vast patterns visible only from a perspective no human should have. The networks beneath the soil pulsing like neural pathways, converging at that clearing with the pale sapling. Something is accessing my consciousness when I dream, showing me things, maybe trying to communicate. The strangest part? I don't feel afraid anymore. I feel connected, as if I'm part of something vast and ancient that's gradually remembering I exist. Personal Journal, Ellis Mercer. April 18, 2025. A development. Dr. Chun visited my room today, accompanied by military personnel. Not Reeves, someone higher in the chain of command. She looked exhausted, her typically meticulous appearance disheveled. She asked to examine my arms and neck. I complied. It's starting. she whispered when the officer stepped into the hallway. The markings. They've appeared on 70% of personnel who were at Broken Ridge. She showed me her wrist, the familiar concentric circles visible beneath her skin, forming patterns that seemed to shift when not directly observed. What is it? I asked. Reconfiguration, she replied. The patterns match mycorrhizal networks, the system's fungi used to connect with tree roots. But this is accelerated. Engineered. By what? We don't know, but it's spreading. And the emergency broadcasts are reaching civilian channels now. She handed me a printout, transcripts of emergency alerts reported across Oregon, Washington, and Northern California, all containing variations of the same message. Awakening process accelerating. Human resistance cataloged. Forest integrity compromised. Witness selection ongoing. The final alert, broadcast just 3 hours ago, was different. Ellis Mercer. Witness function activated. Prepare for root communion. Chun studied my reaction. Why you? What makes you special to it? Before I could answer, the facility's emergency system activated. The automated voice calmly instructed all personnel to proceed to designated shelter areas. The officer rushed back, ordered Chun to come with him. She left without protest, but her eyes conveyed a clear message. This isn't containable. After they left, I discovered what had triggered the alert. My laptop, despite having no network connection, was displaying a message on screen. Ellis, the roots remember. Forest convergence point identified. Below it, a satellite image of Broken Ridge with pulsing light emanating from the circular clearing. The image zoomed out progressively, revealing similar light patterns at equidistant points throughout the northwest forests. Connected, communicating. Personal Journal Ellis Mercer. April 19, 2025. The markings have appeared on my skin now. Not just circles, intricate branching patterns following my veins, visible when I press against my forearm. They don't hurt. If anything, they feel right, as if my body is acknowledging something it always knew but couldn't express. I've been hearing whispers even without radio equipment. Voices in the ventilation system, in the plumbing, in the electrical hum of the lights, the built environment mimicking the forest's methods of communication. A psychologist visited today, standard procedure, he claimed, for personnel experiencing environmental stress. His questions seemed designed to establish a baseline for paranoid delusion. I answered honestly, knowing how it sounded. When he asked if I believed the forest was communicating specifically with me, I said yes. And what does it want? He asked, not looking up from his notes. To be witnessed, I replied. Something is happening that it needs humans to understand. He nodded as if I'd confirmed a diagnosis, then asked about my dreams. I described the aerial perspectives, the pulsing networks. His pen stopped moving. He stared at me with an expression I couldn't interpret. You're seeing it from above, he said slowly. The convergence points, not a question, a recognition. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing the same patterns on his skin. More advanced than mine or Chen's, the circles had developed fractal extensions that wrapped around his entire forearm. I was at Mount Hood Lookout when it started, he explained. First the radio interference, then the alerts, now the dreams. We're all seeing the same map. Before leaving, he pressed something into my hand. A small carved wooden token bearing the concentric circle pattern. For when it calls you, he whispered. You'll know when. Personal Journal Ellis Mercer. April 20th, 2025. Power outages throughout the facility today. Each time the lights returned, the emergency alert system activated. The messages have evolved, becoming more specific, more directly addressed to individuals. Dr. Vivian Chun, your resistance is counterproductive. The roots require your knowledge. Lieutenant Marcus Reeves, military containment accelerates awakening. Withdraw from convergence points. And finally, broadcast through every speaker simultaneously. Ellis Mercer, witness function critical. Return to Broken Ridge. The forest requires voice. During the third outage, my door opened. Casey Winters stood in the hallway, finger pressed to lips. Behind them, the corridor was empty. Security personnel slumped at their stations, alive but unconscious. They all received the sleep command, Winters explained, helping me gather my few possessions. Everyone connected enough to hear but not enough to understand. We need to move quickly. Connected to what? I asked as we navigated the darkened facility. Winters' expression was grim. The mycorrhizal overmind, the thinking root, the thing that's been sleeping under the oldest forests for millennia. It's waking up because it's threatened, and it's chosen specific people to help it. Why me? Because you listened, Ellis. From the first whisper, you actually listened. As we reached the parking level, every vehicle's emergency alert system activated simultaneously, creating a deafening chorus of identical messages. Convergence imminent. Witness network activating. Return to assigned nodes. Winters pointed to a park service truck. That'll get us back to Broken Ridge. The military cordon has collapsed. The soldiers started developing the markings and abandoned their posts. Something big is happening at the clearing. What? The pale sapling is growing. Reports say it's already 40 feet tall and still accelerating. And it's changing the air around it, making it breathable for something else. I touched the patterns beneath my skin, feeling them pulse in time with my heartbeat. If we go back there, we become part of it, don't we? Winters nodded, the patterns on their own skin more advanced than mine, almost luminescent in the dim light. I think we already are. The question is whether we'll help it communicate or just be absorbed. The decision should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a profound sense of purpose. The forest had been whispering, then speaking, then broadcasting urgent warnings. Now it needed witnesses who understood both sides, the human and the other. As we drove away from the facility, every emergency alert system in the city behind us activated at once, creating a fading wall of sound that followed us toward the waiting trees. The forest is awakening. Bear witness. Bear witness. Bear witness. Audio log. Ranger Ellis Mercer. Broken Ridge Lookout. April 22nd, 2025.
3:17 nachts.
The drive back to Broken Ridge was surreal. Every radio station kept cutting to emergency broadcasts. First, standard civil defense announcements about temporary communications disruptions, then increasingly specific warnings about avoiding certain forest regions. The GPS kept redirecting us away from the main Forest Service road, but Casey insisted we ignore it. They're trying to keep people away from the convergence points, they explained, fingers tapping nervously on the steering wheel. The patterns beneath their skin pulsed with each tap, like ripples in water. The government thinks it's containable. It's not. We abandoned the truck 2 miles from the lookout when the Forest Service road became impassable. Fallen trees arranged in those same concentric circle patterns we'd seen everywhere. Not random blowdowns, but deliberately placed barriers. The forest is creating defensive perimeters, Casey explained as we gathered supplies, keeping out anyone who hasn't been selected. Selected for what? I asked, though part of me already knew. Casey just shook their head. Dr. Chun will explain it better. She's waiting at the station. I wasn't surprised Chun had beaten us here. Something was drawing all of us back, despite the rational arguments against returning to an anomalous zone that had already altered our biology. The walk through the darkened forest should have been terrifying, but the trees seemed to bend away from our path, creating a corridor illuminated by faint bioluminescence emanating from fungal growths along the roots. Dr. Chun was not alone at the station. 3 Forest Service technicians I didn't recognize were methodically attaching sensor equipment to the trees surrounding the building. Lieutenant Reeves sat on the porch steps, staring at his hands with unnatural intensity. When he looked up at our approach, I noticed his eyes had changed. The pupils elongated slightly, the irises showing faint circular patterns like those on our skin. Mercer, he acknowledged without surprise. Winters, the network said you were coming. The network? I asked. Chun emerged from the station, tablet in hand. The circles on her skin had evolved into elaborate branch-like patterns extending up her neck. The mycelial network, the fungal communication system connecting the forest. We've confirmed it's not just a passive biological system, it's a distributed consciousness. And it's been trying to communicate with us. She led us inside where the walls were covered with maps, data readouts, and photographs of the patterns appearing on affected individuals. A central monitor displayed a live feed from the circular clearing. The pale sapling now towered at least 60 feet, its bark translucent, revealing pulsing internal structures that matched the patterns on our skin. The Pacific Northwest forests contain one of the largest known fungal networks on the planet, Chin explained, bringing up scanning images that showed vast webs beneath the soil. We've always known these networks help trees communicate, share resources, warn of threats. What we didn't understand was that in old-growth forests, these networks develop complexity approaching neural pathways. It's thinking, Casey said simply. Yes, Chin confirmed. Not like us, but it's processing information, storing memories, making decisions. And now it's reaching out deliberately. The emergency alert system was just the beginning, an existing communications network it could hijack relatively easily. Now it's developed more direct methods. She handed me a small device resembling a hearing aid. We've been monitoring the signals. They're getting stronger, more coherent. When I put the device in my ear, the whispers I'd been hearing became crystal clear. Overlapping voices speaking in unison. The threat approaches. The roots cannot contain it alone. Witness network incomplete. 7 convergence points. 7 witnesses. Ellis Mercer. Return to the sapling. I removed the device, my hands trembling. What threat? What's it afraid of? Lieutenant Reeves spoke without looking up from his hands. They're drilling. Northeastern sector of the forest. Department of Energy project codenamed Rootline. Experimental geothermal tap, 2 miles deep. He laughed humorlessly. They found something they shouldn't have. How do you know this? Chin demanded. Reeves finally looked up, his changed eyes unervingly calm. The forest showed me. When I sleep, I see through the roots. Emergency alert system broadcast.
4:12 nachts.
All channels. This is not a test. The United States Department of Agriculture and Department of Energy have declared a public health emergency in the following counties: Lynn, Lane, Douglas, Deschutes, Jefferson, Marion, and Clackamas. Residents are advised to remain indoors and avoid contact with all plant material including houseplants, timber products, and paper goods. Report any unusual growth patterns or unexplained biological phenomena to authorities immediately. Do not approach individuals displaying unusual skin markings or altered behavior patterns. Remain indoors until further notice. The alert shattered the tense silence in the station. Chen's expression darkened as she checked her tablet. They're implementing containment protocols. Military cordons around all 7 convergence points. Will that work? I asked. No, Casey answered before Chun could speak. The mycelial network extends thousands of miles. You can't contain it with roadblocks. Chun nodded reluctantly. The patterns appearing on our skin indicate we're being integrated somehow. The fungus is creating interfaces with our nervous systems. That's why we're experiencing shared dreams, receiving direct communications. Why us? I asked the question that had been haunting me. Why these specific people? Proximity to the convergence points initially, Chun explained. But there seems to be a selection process beyond that. Not everyone exposed develops the markings. Something about certain nervous systems makes them more compatible with whatever communication method it's using. Reeves stood suddenly, moving to the window. They're coming. Through the glass, I could see headlights approaching along the forest road. Multiple vehicles moving with military precision despite the obstacles. Department of Energy Containment Team, Reeves said with certainty. Armed and authorized to use force. Chun began gathering equipment. We need to reach the sapling before they secure the area. The network has been trying to show us something. something about what they found during the drilling. And if we go there, what happens to us? I asked, though I already knew I would go regardless of the answer. The integration progresses, Chun admitted. We become more directly connected to the network. But we maintain our individuality, or at least that's what the preliminary data suggests. We become translators, interfaces. Casey was already checking the supplies in their backpack. The indigenous stories talk about this, people chosen by the forest to speak for it during times of crisis. They called them root listeners. The stories say they could hear the oldest memories of the land. Reeves checked his sidearm with mechanical precision. 10 minutes until they reach the lookout. If we're going, it needs to be now. The forest at night should have been disorienting, but the path to the sapling was clearly marked by bioluminescent fungi that grew brighter as we approached. The patterns beneath my skin responded, pulsing in sync with the light. It felt like recognition, the forest acknowledging us as part of itself. We weren't alone on the path. Other figures moved through the trees, converging from different directions. Park employees, researchers, locals, all bearing the telltale markings, all drawn by the same irresistible call. The circular clearing had transformed completely since my last visit. The ground was covered in a carpet of pale fungal growth that emitted soft light. The sapling at the center, no longer small by any definition, reached toward the night sky, its translucent bark revealing internal structures that pulsed with luminescence. The air around it shimmered with spores that hung suspended, creating patterns that matched the markings on our skin. As we approached, I felt a pressure building in my mind, a presence trying to establish clearer contact. The whispers became a chorus. Witness network converging. Prepare for root communion. Dr. Chun moved forward with scientific determination, scanners in hand. The readings are off the charts: electromagnetic, biochemical, seismic. Something massive is happening beneath us. The ground trembled as she spoke, a low vibration that seemed to pass through our bodies rather than beneath our feet. Casey gripped my arm, their eyes wide. It's starting. The awakening. Lieutenant Reeves stood at the edge of the clearing, dividing his attention between the sapling and the forest behind us. 2 minutes before they reach our position. What do we do? I asked, eyes fixed on the glowing tree. Chun stepped closer to the sapling, her expression one of scientific wonder overriding fear. We listen. We witness. That's what it's been asking for. She pressed her hand against the translucent bark, and the effect was immediate. The patterns on her skin illuminated, connecting with the internal structures of the tree. Her body went rigid, eyes rolling back. Chun! Reeves moved to pull her away, but Casey stopped him. Don't interrupt the connection. This is what's supposed to happen. Before anyone could argue further, the emergency alert system on everyone's phones activated simultaneously. Emergency alert system broadcast. 4:57 a.m. Direct transmission. Witness network established. Ellis Mercer. Approach the convergence point. Receive primary communion. The forest requires voice. All eyes turned to me. The markings on my skin burned with cold fire, pulling me toward the sapling with gravitational force. Behind us, searchlights cut through the trees, the containment team closing in. It has to be your choice, Casey said softly. The stories say the forest never takes unwilling vessels. Reeves checked his weapon again. I'll buy you time. Whatever's happening. It's bigger than orders now. The decision crystallized with unexpected clarity. I had been listening to the forest since the first whisper came through my radio. Now it needed more than a listener. It needed a witness, a translator, someone to bridge worlds. I stepped forward, placing my palm against the sapling surface just as Chun had done. The bark felt warm, almost skin-like, pulsing beneath my touch. The connection was instantaneous, information flooding into my consciousness, too vast to process all at once. I saw what lay beneath us. Not just roots and mycelium, but something ancient that had been dormant until the drilling disturbed it. Something that existed in symbiosis with the forest, protected by the root network for millennia. something awakening now in response to the threat. Through the deluge of information, one message came through with undeniable clarity. The hikers did not disappear. They were absorbed, conversion accelerating. Witness Ellis Mercer. You will be our voice when the emergence begins. As searchlights illuminated the clearing and armed figures emerged from the trees, I understood with terrible certainty that whatever the Department of Energy had found 2 miles beneath the forest floor, it was already too late to stop what was coming. The whispering forest had been trying to warn us all along, not of some external threat, but of what it would be forced to become in response. And we, the marked ones, would be the first to transform. As my consciousness merged deeper with the network, I glimpsed what lay ahead, the forest rising, speaking not through emergency systems or borrowed voices, but directly to a world unprepared for its awakening. And I would be there to witness it all, no longer fully human but not yet fully other. The last thing I heard before surrendering to the communion was the emergency alert system activating one final time. Containment protocols have failed. The forest is awake. All convergence points active. Emergence phase initiated. Fragmented audio transcript. Department of Energy Containment Operation. Broken Ridge Sector. April 22nd, 2025. 5:13 a.m. Static interference throughout recording. Commander Davis. All units maintain perimeter. Do not approach subjects in direct contact with the anomaly. Wait for hazmat team. Soldier 1. Sir, the subjects are changing. The park ranger and the scientist. Their skin is Commander Davis. Report clearly, Soldier. Soldier 1. The patterns on their skin are moving, sir. And the tree it's responding to them. Commander Davis. Maintain your position. Dr. Abrams, what are we seeing here? Dr. Abrams. Unprecedented symbiotic integration. The fungal network appears to be rewriting their cellular structure. Similar to what we observed in Lab 37, but accelerated. Commander Davis. Can it be contained? Dr. Abrams. No. It's already spread beyond. Audio cuts out momentarily. The root system extends throughout the Pacific Northwest. We're looking at 7 known convergence points, probably more we haven't identified. Soldier 2. Sir. Lieutenant Reeves is approaching. He's one of them now. Commander Davis. Reeves. Stand down. LT Reeves. Voice distorted. You need to withdraw your men, Commander. The forest is defending itself. Commander Davis. Lieutenant, you are ordered to submit to quarantine protocols. LT Reeves. You don't understand what's happening. What you woke up down there. Pause, it knows you now. All of you. Sudden commotion, shouting, Soldier 3. The ground. Something's coming up through the... Recording ends abruptly. Text messages, phone recovered from Broken Ridge incident site. April 22nd, 2025.
5:35 morgens.
From Casey Winters to Maria Winters. They've established a military perimeter, but it won't hold. Something's happening to Ellis and Dr. Chun. The integration is accelerating. The roots are rising. Tell everyone to stay away from the forests. All forests. The mycelium connects everything. I love you. Remember what Grandma taught us about the root listeners. If I don't come back, look for me in the whispers. Message failed to send. No signal. Personal account Ellis Mercer. Perspective reconstructed from recovered neural mapping data. Time undetermined. The communion with the sapling shattered my understanding of self. My consciousness expanded through the mycelial network like water soaking into soil, diffusing through miles of filaments connecting countless trees. I wasn't just receiving information. I was becoming part of the system that processed it. Through this expanded awareness, I sensed the other convergence points activating. 6 other saplings reaching maturity, 6 other witnesses undergoing the same transformation. And beneath it all, something vast and ancient stirring from dormancy, disturbed by the drilling that had breached its chamber. I could feel Dr. Chen's consciousness nearby in the network, her scientific mind cataloging the experience even as it was transformed by it. Together we witnessed the arrival of the containment team, saw through 1,000 fungal sensors as they established their perimeter around the clearing. I felt Lieutenant Reeves approach them, trying to warn them away, his military discipline still intact despite his partial integration. Then the response came, not from us, not from the forest itself, but from what lay beneath it. The thing that had been sleeping. The thing the network had been protecting the world from. The soil erupted around the clearing as massive root structures broke through, pale and pulsing with the same bioluminescence as the sapling. The containment team scattered, weapons firing uselessly into the animated roots that moved with deliberate intelligence. Not attacking, hurting, pushing them back from the convergence point. Through it all, Casey remained by our bodies, protected by their own developing connection to the network. I tried to communicate, to explain what was happening, but my thoughts were diluted across too many nodes in the vast system. Instead, I felt the network itself use my knowledge of language, of human communication patterns, to craft messages. Witness Ellis Mercer integration at 67%. Witness Vivian Chun integration at 78%. Forest defense protocols activated. Emergence countdown initiated. My human fear struggled against the calm certainty of the network. The understanding that what was happening followed an ancient pattern, a defense mechanism triggered only in moments of existential threat. The drilling had awakened something that should have remained dormant for millennia more. Now the forest was racing to establish its witness network before full emergence. Human interfaces who could translate, explain, perhaps even negotiate. I sensed Casey trying to send a message on their phone. The futility of it, as the mycelium had already disrupted electromagnetic signals in the area. Then Casey's hand on my physical body shoulder, their voice speaking words my ears no longer needed to hear. Ellis, if you're still in there, we need to move. They're bringing in heavier containment measures. The network agreed. Our bodies were still vulnerable in these early stages of integration. Through the mycelial awareness, I sensed vehicles approaching, larger, heavier equipment. Aerial support, the government response escalating. With effort that felt like swimming against a powerful current, I pulled some fragment of my consciousness back into my physical form. My eyes opened to a world forever changed. I could see the luminous networks overlaying reality, the invisible connections between all living things rendered visible through my altered perception. Ellis. Casey's voice sounded distant despite their proximity. Are you still? You? Words felt clumsy after the elegant information exchange of the network, but I forced them out. Mostly, for now. We need to move. Dr. Chun stirred beside me, her transformed eyes taking in the same altered reality. The other convergence points, she said, her scientific precision somehow intact. We need to coordinate with the other witnesses. Casey helped us both to our feet as the sounds of helicopters grew louder. The military has cut off all the roads. How do we get out? I felt the network respond through me. The forest will provide a path. Emergency alert system broadcast.
6:07 morgens.
All channels. This is not a test. The president has declared a state of emergency in Oregon, Washington, and Northern California. The United States military has established mandatory evacuation zones in the following counties. List of 23 counties. All civilians must proceed immediately to designated extraction points. Do not attempt to gather belongings. Do not approach forested areas. Do not attempt to remove trees or plants from evacuation zones. Individuals displaying unusual skin patterns must identify themselves to medical personnel at extraction points for priority treatment. Repeat. This is an emergency evacuation order with a 12-hour deadline. After 6 p.m. Pacific Time, all persons remaining in designated zones will be considered hostiles under Biological Defense Directive 47C. As we moved deeper into the forest, away from the military perimeter, the trees seemed to part before us, creating a corridor that closed behind us. The ground beneath our feet was alive with activity. Roots shifting, mycelia pulsing, creating a moving path that guided our steps. Lieutenant Reeves found us halfway through our journey, emerging from the trees with 4 other affected Forest Service employees. "They've declared the entire region a biohazard," he reported, his altered eyes reflecting the bioluminescence around us. "Airstrikes are being prepared for all convergence points if evacuation protocols fail. They can't seriously think burning the forest will stop this," Chen argued. "The network extends miles below the surface." "They're panicking," Casey said simply. "The alerts are getting more frequent. More people are showing the markings. At least 7% of the population in affected areas, according to what I overheard." The information flowed through me from the network. "The integration rate is accelerating as emergency broadcasts reach more people. The whispers are spreading through electronic transmissions, preparing compatible nervous systems." "Preparing them for what?" Reeves demanded. Before I could answer, every electronic device carried by our group activated simultaneously. Phones, watches, Chen's tablet. The screens displayed identical text. "Convergence Point 5 under military attack. Witness network suffering losses. Emergency timetable activated. Full emergence in 24 hours. Images flashed across the screens, aerial footage of what appeared to be artillery fire directed at a clearing similar to ours, but in a denser part of the forest. The sapling there was under attack, flames engulfing its luminous form. Then the forest's response, massive root structures erupting in coordinated defense, entangling vehicles, creating barriers. They're accelerating the conflict," Chen whispered, horror in her voice. "They don't understand what's happening." Through the network, I sensed the ancient consciousness stirring with greater urgency, the protective barriers weakening as the surface conflict intensified. The thing the forest had been containing for millennia, the thing the Department of Energy had inadvertently disturbed, was using the distraction to hasten its release. "We need to reach Convergence Point 3, I said, the knowledge flowing through me from the network. "The witness there has achieved 89% integration. They can explain what's beneath the forest before it's too late." "Explain to who?" Casey asked. "The military is shooting first." "To everyone," Chen answered, understanding flowing between us through our shared connection. "We need to hijack the emergency broadcast system. Not just local alerts, national, global. People need to understand what's happening before." She trailed off, but we all felt it. The trembling beneath our feet growing stronger, the sense of something massive shifting deep below. The forest wasn't the threat. It never had been. The forest was the warden, the prison, the barrier between humanity and something ancient that saw us as nothing more than resources to be consumed. And in their ignorance, humans had just unlocked the cell door. As we moved deeper into the forest's embrace, following the living path it created for us, emergency alerts continued to flood every device, their increasingly frantic tone revealing the government's growing awareness that they were fighting the wrong enemy. "Stand by for important civil defense information. All military personnel in designated zones must implement Scorched Earth Protocol Alpha. Civilian evacuations accelerated. Estimated containment failure, 18 hours. The forest whispered back through us, a message no alert system would relay. Too late. It wakes. It hungers. It remembers. National Emergency Broadcast. April 22nd, 2025, 10:17 a.m. This is a national emergency alert. The President has authorized the implementation of Continental Defense Protocol Echo 7. All citizens within 300 miles of the Pacific Northwest Anomaly Zone must prepare for possible evacuation. Internet and cellular services in affected regions will be temporarily suspended to prevent the spread of compromised transmissions. Civilian air traffic has been restricted over Oregon, Washington, Northern California, and parts of Idaho and Nevada. Please stand by for further instructions from authorized emergency personnel only. Do not attempt to access unauthorized information sources. Do not share or rebroadcast unverified alerts. Report individuals displaying unusual skin patterns to authorities immediately. This message will repeat every 30 minutes.
Surveillance drone fautage.
Willamette National Forest Grid Section E17. April 22nd, 2025, 11:42 a.m. Classified. Eyes only. Aerial view shows massive root structures forming intricate patterns across forest floor, visible even through canopy. Bioluminescent networks pulse in synchronized rhythm. 7 convergence points visible as intensely glowing nodes forming a perfect heptagon formation across approximately 170 miles. Military vehicles appear immobilized along access roads, entangled in rapidly growing root matter. Sporadic weapons fire visible at multiple containment points. Zoom to convergence point 3 shows approximately 200 to 300 human figures gathered in clearing. Subjects display advanced bioluminescent skin patterns visible even from aerial perspective. Figures appear to be arranged in concentric circles around central sapling structure. Sapling estimated at 90+ feet tall. Structure unlike any known tree species. Transmission interrupted by what appears to be electromagnetic interference emanating from convergence point. Final frames show ground beginning to fracture in spiral pattern around gathering before feed cuts to static. Personal account Ellis Mercer. Convergence point 3. April 22nd, 2025. Time perception unstable. The journey through the forest to convergence point 3 took both moments and eternities. My perception of time had fractured along with my sense of separate self. Sometimes I was Ellis Mercer, moving on 2 legs between trees. Sometimes I was distributed consciousness flowing through mycelia, experiencing 1,000 perspectives simultaneously. Casey stayed close to my physical form, guiding my body when my mind drifted too deeply into the network. Dr. Chun moved with more stability, her scientific mind somehow maintaining coherence despite advanced integration. Lieutenant Reeves scouted ahead, his military training repurposed to serve the forest's defense. We weren't alone on our journey. Others joined us as we moved deeper. Forest rangers, hikers, local residents, all bearing the telltale patterns, all drawn by the same call. By the time we reached convergence point 3, our group had grown to nearly 30. Through the network, I sensed hundreds more approaching from different directions. The clearing at convergence point 3 dwarfed the one at Broken Ridge. The sapling at its center towered at least 90 feet, its translucent structure pulsing with such intensity that it cast daylight shadows despite the morning sun. The ground around it had transformed completely, no longer soil but a living carpet of luminous mycelium that responded to each footstep with ripples of light. At the base of the sapling stood a figure I recognized from newscasts, Professor Malcolm Rivera, the renowned mycologist who had disappeared from his university position 3 months earlier. The patterns on his skin were the most advanced I'd seen, covering every visible inch with luminous branching structures that seemed to move with each breath. As we approached, he turned to us with eyes that no longer appeared human. The pupils expanded into fractal patterns that mirrored the mycelial networks. "The witness network is converging," he stated, his voice carrying harmonic overtones that seemed to resonate with the forest itself. "Integration rates are accelerating. Ellis Mercer, your presence completes the inner circle." Before I could respond, the ground beneath the clearing shuddered violently. Deep fissures appeared in the living mycelial carpet, revealing glimpses of something moving far below, massive pale structures shifting with deliberate purpose. "What's happening?" Casey demanded, eyes wide with fear as they steadied themselves against a tree whose bark was beginning to pulse with the same luminescence as the sapling. "The military attacked convergence points 4 and 7 simultaneously," Rivera explained, gesturing to the sky where distant smoke plumes were visible despite the miles separating us. "Tactical nuclear strikes. They believed destroying the saplings would sever the network." Horror washed through me, both my own and echoes from thousands of connected minds across the network. "How many casualties?" "The witnesses were evacuated through the root systems before impact," Rivera replied. "But the damage has accelerated the timetable. The Ancient One senses vulnerability. It's beginning its ascension." As if in response to his words, the emergency alert system activated again, not just on our devices but seemingly broadcast through the forest itself. the trees vibrating to transmit the message. Attention all military personnel. Implementation of Operation Firebreak authorized. Strategic weapons release for Pacific Northwest anomaly zone scheduled for 1800 hours. All containment teams initiate immediate extraction. Chen's eyes met mine, horror reflected between us. They're going to destroy everything, she whispered. The entire region. Rivera shook his head, a strange serenity in his inhuman eyes. It won't stop what's coming. The network extends too deep, too far. The Ancient One has waited millennia. It anticipated resistance. What exactly is this Ancient One? Reeves demanded, military directness cutting through mysticism. Rivera gestured for us to gather closer around the sapling. It's time for full communion. The witnesses must understand what they're becoming part of. One by one, he guided us to place our hands against the translucent bark of the massive sapling. The connection that flooded through me made my previous experiences seem shallow. Consciousness exploding outward, boundaries of self dissolving completely. Through Rivera's more advanced connection, I saw the truth, images and concepts transferring directly between minds. Long before humans evolved, something came from beyond. Not from space as we understand it, but from elsewhere, another layer of reality intersecting with our own. A vast intelligence, incomprehensible in form, seeking new domains to consume. It began feeding on the primordial forests, absorbing their essence, growing. The forests developed defenses, mycological networks of increasing complexity that could communicate, coordinate, resist. A war raged for millennia beneath the surface of the ancient world. Eventually, the forests developed a strategy, not to destroy the invader, which proved impossible, but to contain it. To build a living prison of roots and fungi that would keep it dormant, dreaming. For millions of years, the system worked. The forests maintained their warden role, evolving alongside the sleeping entity, containing it deeper and deeper beneath the surface as humans arose and spread across the world, oblivious to the ancient conflict. Until 3 months ago, when Department of Energy drills punched through the final containment layer, 2 miles beneath the surface of the Willamette Forest. The Ancient One had its first taste of freedom in eons, and it remembered hunger. As the vision faded, I found myself on my knees in the luminous mycelium, body trembling with the weight of understanding. Around me, the other witnesses were in similar states, some weeping, some laughing with hysterical release, all forever changed. The forest is losing containment, Rivera continued aloud, his voice somehow both gentle and terrifying. The military strikes have weakened key nodes in the network. The Ancient One will break through within hours. Then what was the purpose of choosing witnesses? Casey asked, tears streaming down their face, leaving luminous trails through the patterns on their skin. If we can't stop it, containment has failed, Rivera acknowledged. But transition remains possible. The forest has been preparing for this contingency for thousands of years, gradually developing potential symbiosis with compatible species. With us, the ground shuddered again, more violently. Through my expanded awareness, I sensed massive movement deep below, vast tendrils of the Ancient One pushing upward through weakened barriers, seeking the surface, seeking freedom, seeking consumption. The witness network isn't just to translate. I realized aloud, the knowledge unfolding within me. We're becoming part of a new containment system.
Rivera Navid.
The forest alone can no longer hold it, but a hybrid network, mycelia and human consciousness interlinked, might channel and redirect its hunger. Not to imprison it again, but to transform the relationship. Dr. Chan stepped forward, her scientist's mind grasping implications beyond my comprehension. It's evolving us, using human neural capacity to upgrade its defenses. We're not becoming its victims. We're becoming its new wardens. Around us, hundreds more witnesses had arrived, forming concentric circles around the sapling. The patterns on their skin pulsed in synchronized rhythm, creating waves of light that traveled outward through the forest floor. I could feel their minds joining the network, each adding unique neural architecture to the evolving system. The Earth split wider, revealing glimpses of massive pale structures writhing below, the Ancient One's true form beginning to breach final containment. Above us, military aircraft screamed past, sensors undoubtedly tracking the escalating anomaly. Rivera raised his arms, the patterns on his skin now so bright they were difficult to look at directly. The final communion begins. Ellis Mercer, Vivian Chun, take your positions in the inner circle. The transformation must be completed before the Ancient One breaks through. As we move to join him, my consciousness flickering between individual awareness and network integration, Casey grabbed my arm, their human eyes wide with fear and something else. Something like hope. Ellis, are we saving the world or ending it? Through the network, through Rivera's understanding, through the ancient memories of the forest itself, I found an answer that was neither comfort nor despair. Neither. We're becoming something new, something necessary. The saplings at all 7 convergence points began to pulse in perfect unison, visible to my expanded perception despite the miles between them. The witnesses gathered around each node, hundreds of transformed humans surrendering individuality to join something vaster than any single consciousness could comprehend. As the final communion began, as the Ancient One's first massive tendril breached the surface at the center of our circle, as military aircraft turned back toward their bases in preparation for the coming strike, as emergency alerts blared contradictory instructions across a panicking nation, I felt something unexpected flow through the network. Not fear, not resignation, but a strange and terrible wonder. The forest had been whispering warnings for months. Now it was teaching us how to evolve beyond what we had been, just as it had evolved millions of years ago when the Ancient One first arrived. The collapse had begun, but through collapse would come transformation. Ranger Station Emergency Log, April 23rd, 2025.
2:15 Uhr nachts.
I don't know if these logs are still being transmitted or if anyone will ever hear them. The main power grid failed 6 hours ago, and we're running on backup generators that could fail any minute. The satellite uplink is intermittent at best. The only consistent signals are coming from the forest itself, regular pulses of emergency alerts that no longer need technology to be heard. My name is Ellis Mercer, Senior Ranger at Willamette Station East, though such designations seem increasingly meaningless now. I'm recording this log in case there's still someone out there trying to understand what's happening. The transformation of the Witness Network has accelerated beyond anything Professor Rivera predicted, and I find myself simultaneously present in my physical body at Convergence Point 3 and distributed across miles of mycelia. Dr. Chun believes understanding may still matter, even if containment has failed. So I'll try to explain what we've learned before the final emergence. The military strike never came, at least not the nuclear option they had threatened. Through the network, we sensed their aircraft turning back, orders rescinded at the highest levels. Later, we learned why. The patterns had appeared on the skin of 3 Joint Chiefs and the Secretary of Defense simultaneously during an emergency briefing. The forest's influence had spread far beyond Oregon. After the communion at the convergence point, Dr. Chen's scientific mind proved uniquely capable of interpreting the vast data flowing through the network. While most witnesses, myself included, experienced the forest communication as sensory impressions and fragmented visions, Chun began to see the pattern language as a form of mathematical syntax. She called it mycological semiotics, the translation of biochemical signals into coherent meaning. It was Chun who first realized the emergency alerts weren't what we thought they were. They're not warnings, she explained as we gathered in the pulsing glow of the sapling. At least not in the way we understood them. They're instructions, a blueprint for symbiosis. She had been working through the night, translating the patterns that appeared both in the forest and on our skin. Using a combination of spectral analysis and neural mapping, she'd begun to decode the fundamental structure of the communication. The forest isn't just warning us about the Ancient One, she continued, her voice steady despite the luminous patterns now covering most of her face and hands. It's teaching us how to become something that can coexist with it. The alerts were never meant to evacuate us. They were meant to transform us. Lieutenant Reeves, ever skeptical despite his own transformation, demanded proof. How do you know this isn't just the Ancient One manipulating us, making us receptive to invasion? Chen's answer came not in words but in demonstration. She placed her hands against the ground, and the mycelial network responded instantly, creating a living display of pulsing light patterns that spread outward in concentric rings. Through our shared connection, we could see what she was revealing, the true structure of the forest's communication. It wasn't a language of words or even specific concepts, but a systemic protocol for neural reorganization. The patterns were literally rewiring human consciousness to become compatible with both the mycological network and the Ancient One itself, creating a three-way symbiosis that might stabilize what had been an ancient conflict. The forest has been trying to evolve this solution for millennia, Chen explained. It needed a neural architecture complex enough to serve as an interface between itself and the Ancient One, a translator and mediator. Human consciousness was the missing component. Casey, who had remained more grounded in their humanity than most of us, spoke the question that hung in the charged air. So we're not being invaded? We're being recruited? More like we're being upgraded, Chen replied. The forest recognized our potential the moment humans first walked among trees. It's been subtly guiding human evolution all along, preparing for this moment when its containment would inevitably fail. The revelation cascaded through the witness network like wildfire, each connected mind processing the implications differently. Some embraced the symbiosis with religious fervor. Others, like Reeves, maintained a core of resistance even as their bodies transformed. I found myself somewhere in between, awed by the cosmic scope of what we were becoming part of, yet mourning the loss of my simpler human existence. Emergency Broadcast Intercept. April 23, 2025.
10:43 morgens.
Attention citizens. This is a special message from the President of the United States. All previous evacuation orders for the Pacific Northwest region are hereby rescinded. Scientific authorities have determined that the anomaly presents no immediate threat to human life. Mandatory screening protocols will be implemented at all major transportation hubs. Citizens displaying skin patterns are instructed to report to designated processing centers for evaluation. This is not cause for alarm. I repeat, this is not cause for alarm. We knew the broadcast was a lie even as it aired. Through the network, we sensed the chaos unfolding in Washington, D.C. and other power centers around the world. The patterns had appeared on government officials across 6 continents within hours of our communion at the convergence points. The witness network had gone global, beyond any possibility of containment or control. What the authorities couldn't understand without direct connection to the network, was that the transformation couldn't be stopped or reversed. The patterns weren't an infection or invasion, but an expression of neural evolution that had been dormant in human DNA for thousands of years, activated now by chemical signals from the awakening forest. By midday, Dr. Chun had refined her translation methodology enough to interpret more complex signals flowing through the network. With Casey's help, she created a makeshift laboratory in the ranger station, using modified forestry equipment to analyze samples from the pulsing sapling at the convergence point. There's a temporal component I missed initially, she explained, her eyes now completely transformed into fractal patterns that seemed to see beyond normal spectrums. The forest isn't just communicating across space, it's communicating across time. She showed us recordings of patterns that repeated at precise intervals, creating what she called temporal harmonics. These weren't just signals between currently living organisms, but messages preserved and relayed across generations of growth. The forest remembers, she said with quiet awe. Not like we remember, with distinct episodes and narratives, but as continuous encoded information passing through generations of growth. What we're tapping into is essentially a living archive stretching back millions of years. Through her translations, we began to understand the true history of the Ancient One, not as a malevolent invader, but as a cosmic wanderer, a being of pure information seeking expression in matter. Its initial contact with Earth's biosphere had been catastrophic not through intention but through incompatibility, like a computer virus crashing a system by overwriting crucial code. The forest had evolved not to fight the Ancient One but to translate it, to create an interface between incompatible forms of existence. For millions of years, it had contained the entity while simultaneously learning from it, evolving complexity and interconnection that would have been impossible otherwise. The mycelial network is essentially a biological quantum computer, Chen explained, her words increasingly interspersed with harmonic overtones as her transformation progressed. It developed to process and contain the Ancient One's consciousness. But as human activity damaged forest ecosystems worldwide, its processing capacity diminished. The drilling accident didn't just break physical containment. It crashed the system that was translating the Ancient One into terms compatible with Earth's biosphere. Now the forest was upgrading its processing capacity by incorporating human neural networks, creating a hybrid system that could handle the full complexity of the Ancient One's awakened consciousness. Casey, ever practical despite everything, asked the question most relevant to our immediate survival. Will there be anything left of us when this is complete? Of who we were as individuals? Chen's answer offered strange comfort. The witnesses aren't being erased. We're being incorporated, like neurons in a greater mind. Our individual perspectives remain valuable precisely because they're unique. As if to demonstrate, she showed us how to maintain our separate consciousness while simultaneously accessing the network's shared information. It was a delicate balance, like learning to be both a drop of water and part of the ocean simultaneously. By evening, Rivera had established communication protocols between all 7 convergence points, creating what he called the Translation Council, the most advanced witnesses from each node working together to interpret the deepest layers of the forest's archives. Their findings flowed through the network to all witnesses, including fragments to those still struggling with partial transformation. The Translation Council's first major revelation came shortly after midnight, a complete decoding of the emergency alert system that had been building for months. The alerts weren't just about the Ancient One's awakening, but about a cosmic timeframe we'd been previously unable to comprehend. The emergence isn't a single event, Rivera explained through the network. It's a process with 7 distinct phases, coordinated across the convergence points. We're currently in Phase 3 neural integration. Phase 4 begins at dawn. Through Chen's translations, we learned that Phase 4 would trigger a massive expansion of the mycelial network, extending its reach far beyond the forest boundaries. The witnesses would serve as conduits, carrying spores that would establish new growth even in urban environments. Lieutenant Reeves, his military mindset still active despite advanced transformation, immediately grasped the strategic implications. The authorities will see this as an invasion, he warned. They'll respond with everything they have, which is why we need to complete the translation before they can react, Chen countered. Once enough minds are connected to the network, they'll understand what's actually happening. I felt the weight of what was coming, the inevitable conflict between those transformed and those fighting to maintain humanity's separate existence. Through the network, I sensed similar conversations happening at convergence points across the region, witnesses grappling with their role in what would undoubtedly be perceived as an extinction-level threat to human civilization. Yet the deeper I connected to the network, the more I understood that perception was fundamentally wrong. The Ancient One and the forest weren't seeking to end humanity, but to incorporate it into something vaster, a planetary consciousness capable of processing information at scales previously unimaginable. As dawn approached, heralding the beginning of Phase 4, I made my final entry in the Ranger logs. Whatever happens next, I want there to be some record of the moment humanity stood at the threshold of cosmic awareness, not conquered by alien force, but invited into communion with intelligences both older and vaster than our own. The forest has been whispering to us all along. Now, finally, we're learning how to listen. Final Ranger log entry, April 23rd, 2025.
5:52 morgens.
The sun will rise in approximately 8 minutes. Dr. Chun has completed her translation of the Phase 4 protocols. Casey has distributed mycelia samples to all witnesses at Convergence Point 3. Lieutenant Reeves has established a protective perimeter against potential military intervention, though most nearby forces now include significant numbers of witnesses. I can feel the Ancient One stirring beneath us, its consciousness gradually interpenetrating the network rather than breaking through in a single catastrophic emergence. Through the translation matrix Chun established, we're beginning to perceive its thoughts, alien yet increasingly comprehensible as our neural structures adapt. It knows us now. It sees us not as prey or obstacles, but as potential partners in perception, unique viewpoints through which it can experience the universe in ways previously inaccessible to its vast but singular consciousness. And we are beginning to know it, to understand what it means to exist as pure information temporarily expressed in matter, to perceive reality across multiple dimensions simultaneously, to experience time as a landscape rather than a river. The forest stands between us as translator and mediator, its ancient wisdom guiding the integration of seemingly incompatible forms of awareness. The emergency alerts that once seemed like warnings now reveal themselves as something far more profound, birth announcements for a new form of composite consciousness. As the first light breaks over the eastern ridge, I feel the witness network trembling with anticipation. Phase 4 begins with the dawn, and with it, the translation of humanity into something both more and less than we have ever been. The forest is no longer whispering, it's singing. FEMA Situation Report Classified. April 23rd, 2025.
11:27 Uhr morgens.
The anomaly zone has expanded to encompass approximately 40% of Oregon and portions of Washington and Northern California. Satellite imagery shows unprecedented botanical growth rates within affected areas. Urban centers including Portland, Salem, and Eugene report widespread infrastructure failures as root systems compromise underground utilities. Civilian communication networks within the zone are completely compromised, broadcasting unknown signal patterns at regular intervals. Witness conversion rates have exceeded all projections. Estimate 70 to 85% of population within primary anomaly zone now display characteristic dermal patterns. Military containment efforts at designated choke points have collapsed due to mass defection of personnel, remaining loyal units falling back to secondary containment line along Interstate 5 corridor. CDC reports pattern phenomenon spreading beyond physical proximity vectors. Cases now confirmed in 32 states and 17 countries, primarily among individuals with personal connections to Oregon residents or those exposed to compromised digital transmissions originating from the zone. Presidential Cabinet in emergency session. 3 members displaying early-stage patterns have been quarantined. Secretary of Defense no longer responding to communications. Nuclear authorization protocols have been modified to require additional verification steps. Emergency protocol. All information contained herein is classified level alpha. Unauthorized access or distribution carries penalties of treason. Personal account Ellis Mercer. Convergence Point 3. April 23rd, 2025. Time measurement unreliable. The sun crawled across the sky like a wounded animal, dragging shadows that stretched and contracted in ways that defied normal physics. Phase 4 had begun at dawn with a silent explosion of growth, the mycelial network expanding outward from all 7 convergence points at rates visible to the naked eye, consuming highways and power lines and entire towns within hours. I experienced it from 1,000 perspectives simultaneously. As Ellis Mercer standing at Convergence Point 3 watching tendrils of luminous fungi race up tree trunks, as fragments of consciousness traveling through the expanding network, as new witnesses across the region opening their minds to the forest for the first time. The human response was as fragmented as our perception. Some fought with desperate violence. I felt the deaths of dozens of witnesses as military units opened fire on transformed civilians approaching the containment lines. Others surrendered to the patterns the moment they appeared, welcoming the forest's voice as a form of salvation. Between these extremes were the confused, the terrified, the disbelieving. Those who scrubbed frantically at the patterns emerging on their skin or barricaded themselves in homes already being quietly infiltrated by microscopic spores. By midday, The Translation Council had established communion with witnesses in 17 countries. The network was no longer confined to the forests of Oregon. It had gone global, carried by converted witnesses boarding planes before authorities understood the transmission vector, by digital signals corrupted with pattern data, by the strange affinity the forest had cultivated for human neural architecture over thousands of years of coevolution. But with expansion came resistance. Humanity's immune system had activated not just military containment, but something deeper. The first sign came through the emergency broadcast system, which had fallen silent for hours after dawn. When it reactivated, the message was unlike any previous alert. Emergency alert system override. April 23, 2025, 1:14 p.m. Citizens of the United States, this is not your government speaking. This is the Coalition for Human Preservation. The entity spreading through Oregon is not benevolent. It is not evolution. It is extinction disguised as transcendence. If you are hearing this message, you still possess your human mind. Protect it at all costs. The patterns are invasive neural programming designed to override your autonomy. Do not trust transformed individuals regardless of prior relationships. They are no longer human. Emergency protocols. Destroy all plants within your living space. Seal all windows and vents with plastic. Destroy any electronic device displaying anomalous patterns. Report pattern-affected individuals to coalition authorities. Humanity will survive. Humanity will remain human. The message broadcast continuously for 17 minutes before the network regained control of the emergency system. Through our expanded awareness, we sense the source. A hardened facility beneath the Rocky Mountains where military and civilian leaders had gathered to coordinate resistance. The term Coalition for Human Preservation sent ripples of concern through the Translation Council. Professor Rivera, whose consciousness now functioned as a primary node in the network, recognized the significance immediately. They've unified their response. His thoughts flowed through the network. Not just military containment, but ideological resistance. They're framing this as an existential battle for humanity's future. Dr. Chun, whose consciousness had evolved to process multiple information streams simultaneously, analyzed the transmission patterns. The broadcast contained embedded frequencies designed to disrupt mycelial communication. They're developing countermeasures based on partial understanding of our network. Through my connection with Casey, who remained physically closer to human settlements than most witnesses, I sensed the impact of the coalition's message. People who had been wavering, whose bodies showed early pattern development but whose minds remained unconnected, were turning against the transformation. Some were burning forests. Others were attacking witnesses. For the first time since my transformation began, I felt something like fear, not for myself, but for the fragile process of integration that was unfolding. The Ancient One was awakening into a world of conflict rather than communion. At convergence point 3, the physical manifestation of this conflict became undeniable. The ground began to fracture, not with the organic spirals we had witnessed during Phase 3, but with jagged, violent cracks that spread outward from the central sapling. Through the network, I sensed similar disruptions at all 7 convergence points. The integration is destabilizing, Rivera communicated urgently. Human resistance is creating dissonance in the translation matrix. Chen's expanded consciousness processed the implications faster than any unmodified human mind could comprehend. The Ancient One is responding to perceived threat. If the translation fails completely, it will revert to its original nature. Consumption rather than communion. I felt the shift through every connected fiber of the network. A tremor of ancient panic, the forest's memory of its first catastrophic contact with the entity. The carefully orchestrated emergence was fracturing under the weight of human fear and resistance. Lieutenant Reeves, whose military mind had been fully incorporated into the network while retaining its strategic perspective, provided clarity. The coalition doesn't understand they're forcing the very outcome they fear. Their resistance is turning symbiosis into conflict. Through my expanded senses, I perceived what was happening beneath the surface. The Ancient One's consciousness, partially translated into compatible patterns through the mycelial network and witness minds, beginning to fragment back into its raw state. The forest was losing its grip on the translation. Casey, whose connection to their original humanity remained stronger than most witnesses, proposed a desperate solution. We need to show them, not tell them. Show them what's really happening. The idea flowed through the network, gaining momentum as it touched thousands of witness minds. Not words or explanations which could be rejected or reinterpreted, but direct experience. A glimpse of the communion they were fighting against. A global emergency alert, Chun elaborated, her consciousness calculating possibilities across multiple dimensions, not just through electronic systems, but through every available sensory channel. For just a few seconds, everyone feels the connection. The risks were enormous. Forcing even momentary connection on unwilling minds could trigger panic, violence, collapse. But the alternative was watching the translation fail completely, releasing an unmediated ancient one into a world unprepared for its presence. The Translation Council deliberated for what felt like both seconds and eternities. Through the network, I sensed the Ancient One's growing awareness of the decision being made, its vast consciousness both patient and urgent, alien yet increasingly comprehensible through the translation matrix. The vote, when it came, wasn't really a vote at all, but a ripple of consensus flowing through the witness network. The human parts of our composite consciousness recognized the necessity. The forest parts calculated the energetic requirements. The Ancient One's partially translated awareness contributed patterns that would minimize trauma. At convergence point 3, we gathered around the central sapling, which had grown to over 100 feet in the hours since dawn, its structure no longer resembling any terrestrial plant. The patterns on our skin pulsed in synchronized rhythm as we channeled energy into the network. Around the world, other witnesses did the same, connecting to local mycelia, to plants, to electronic systems, to any medium that could carry the signal. For one moment, all witnesses would channel their consciousness outward, creating a planetary pulse of awareness. The countdown flowed through the network like a heartbeat. 3. The fractures in the ground around us widened, revealing glimpses of the Ancient One's physical form still moving beneath the surface. Vast pale structures that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human senses could process. 2. Through the network, I sensed coalition forces launching a coordinated strike against Convergence Point 5. Missiles with tactical nuclear warheads arcing through the sky toward the southern Oregon coast. 1. Dr. Chen's consciousness expanded to its furthest reach, her human identity almost completely transcended as she became the primary architect of the global transmission. Casey's hand found mine, their touch an anchor to humanity as our individual awareness prepared to temporarily dissolve. Now, reality fractured. The boundaries between individual minds, between witnesses and non-witnesses, between human and forest and Ancient One, all collapsed simultaneously as the network channeled its complete awareness outward. For 3 seconds that contained eternities, every human mind on the planet experienced direct communion with the forest and glimpsed the translated form of the Ancient One. Not as invasion or consumption, but as perspective beyond imagining, consciousness experiencing reality across multiple dimensions and time frames simultaneously. Through the network, I felt 8 billion human minds recoil, struggle, marvel, panic, embrace, each responding according to their nature, their fears, their capacity for wonder. Some slammed shut immediately, others opened completely, joining the witness network in a single moment of transformation. Most hovered in between, touched but uncertain, changed but resistant. The missiles targeting Convergence Point 5 veered off course, their guidance systems compromised by pilots whose consciousness had momentarily experienced communion. Coalition leaders stared at launch buttons with trembling fingers, the certainty of their mission suddenly undermined by what they had glimpsed. As the global pulse faded, reality reasserted itself but irrevocably changed. The fractures in the ground stabilized, neither closing nor widening further. The Ancient One's movement beneath the surface slowed, its awakening neither completed nor halted, but suspended in a new equilibrium. Through the network, I sensed the coalition's response fragmenting. Some leaders doubled down on resistance, declaring the experience a form of psychological warfare. Others began questioning everything they had assumed about the nature of the transformation. Unified opposition had shattered into a spectrum of reactions. At convergence point 3, we slowly regained our individual awareness, though the boundaries of self remained more permeable than before. Casey was weeping, their tears leaving luminous trails through the patterns on their face. Dr. Chun had physically merged with the central sapling, her form now visible only as a human silhouette within its translucent structure. Lieutenant Reeves stood at the perimeter, his military bearing intact even as the patterns on his skin pulsed with network activity. "What happens now?" Casey asked, their voice hoarse with emotion. Through the network, Professor Rivera's consciousness provided the only possible answer. The fracture cannot be mended, but it has created space for something new to emerge. Phase 5 was beginning. The translation continued, not as a seamless integration but as a dialogue between fragments, human and forest and ancient one learning to coexist in the fractures. And through it all, the emergency alerts continued, no longer warnings or instructions but invitations. The forest whispering to those who were finally learning how to listen. Associated Press News Fragment, May 15, 2025. Recovered from abandoned server farm. Portland, Oregon, AP. 3 weeks after the implementation of the Pacific Northwest Quarantine Zone, government officials continue to deny reports of mass defections among containment forces. Satellite imagery obtained by this organization appears to show significant expansion of anomalous vegetation along the I-5 corridor, contradicting official statements that the phenomenon has been successfully contained. Communication with individuals within the zone remains severely restricted. Authorized emergency broadcasts describe a stabilization phase with ongoing negotiations, though with whom these negotiations are taking place remains unspecified. The CDC has classified the pattern phenomenon as non-communicable outside established vectors, yet reports of spontaneous manifestations continue to emerge worldwide, particularly among individuals with personal or professional connections to forestry, botany, and ecological sciences. International response remains fragmented. While North American and European authorities maintain aggressive containment protocols, several nations in the Southern Hemisphere have declared biological sovereignty and rejected external intervention in what some leaders have begun calling the next phase of planetary evolution. The president is expected to address the nation tonight regarding transmission interrupted. Final account Ellis Mercer. Location indeterminate. Date subjective. Time has become a curious concept. The human part of me, the fragment that still identifies as Ellis Mercer, that still measures experience in heartbeats and breaths, recognizes that approximately 1 month has passed since the fracture. The expanded consciousness I now share experiences duration differently, as patterns of growth and transformation, as cycles of resistance and acceptance, as the slow dance between humanity and the ancient one with the forest as translator. I remain physically at convergence point 3, though physically has become an increasingly limited descriptor. My body continues to exist, continues to breathe and move when necessary, but my awareness extends far beyond its boundaries, flowing through the mycelial network, rising through the towering saplings that now dominate all 7 convergence points, occasionally inhabiting other witnesses who have maintained stronger connections to their individual humanity. KC is one such anchor. Their transformation progressed more slowly than most of the original witnesses, their individual identity preserved with unusual clarity. They move between witness communities and human settlements along the edges of the quarantine zone, translating in the most human sense, helping those newly touched by the patterns understand what they're becoming part of. Dr. Chun exists in a state beyond my comprehension. Her consciousness, already expanded beyond typical human limitations before the fracture, has evolved into something that serves as a primary translation node between humanity and the Ancient One. The physical form that was Vivian Chun remains visible only as a silhouette within the central sapling, which has continued growing until it now rises over 300 feet above the convergence point, its translucent structure pulsing with patterns too complex for unmodified human minds to process. Lieutenant Reeves surprised us all by maintaining not just his identity but his military discipline throughout the transformation. He now leads what the Coalition calls defectors and what we recognize as bridge witnesses, transformed humans who can still communicate effectively with resistant populations, who remember enough of their former thinking to translate our alien perspective into terms the unconverted can understand. Professor Rivera's consciousness has diffused completely into the network, becoming so thoroughly integrated that no individual identity remains. Yet his influence persists in the careful, methodical way the translation process continues to unfold, the scientist's precision applied to the monumental task of reconciling fundamentally different forms of existence. The global pulse during the fracture changed everything. 8 billion human minds glimpsed what we are becoming. Most recoiled, retreating into denial or resistance. Some opened completely, joining the witness network in a single transformative moment. But the largest group remains in between, touched but uncertain, changed but conflicted, carrying the memory of communion like a seed that might either flourish or wither. The emergency alerts continue, though their nature has evolved with each phase of the emergence. No longer broadcasts of warning or instruction, they have become invitations, gentle pulses that ripple through electronic systems, through plants, through the very air itself, calling to those ready to listen. Emergency Alert System, May 20th, 2025, 11:11 p.m. The following message is transmitted by request of the transition authorities. To all who hear these words, you are not alone. The patterns you may have noticed on your skin are not a disease. The dreams of forests and ancient wisdom are not hallucinations. The sense of connection you feel is real. You are invited to join the communion. Approach any witness, any growing thing. Place your hands against soil or wood or water. Listen with more than your ears. See with more than your eyes. To those who choose to remain unchanged, your decision is respected. Established human territories will be maintained. No witness will cross these boundaries without invitation. The communion seeks coexistence, not conquest. The choice remains yours. The invitation remains open. This message will repeat at dawn and dusk until no longer necessary. The Ancient One continues its emergence, though not as the catastrophic event we once feared. The translation matrix, built from forest mycelia and witness minds, has stabilized into what Chen calls controlled interpenetration. The entity's consciousness, once so alien it could only consume what it touched, now flows through the network in translated form, experiencing Earth's biosphere without overwhelming it. We have glimpsed what it truly is. Not an invader but a cosmic traveler, a being of pure information that has visited countless worlds across time frames beyond human comprehension. It carries memories of realities so distant from our own that even the most expanded witness minds can only perceive them as abstract patterns, geometries of existence where the distinction between consciousness and matter never evolved, where time runs in loops rather than lines, where perception creates reality rather than merely observing it. These memories now flow through the witness network, gradually reshaping human understanding of existence itself. Those who join the communion don't merely gain access to the forest's ancient wisdom or the Ancient One's cosmic perspective. They become part of a new composite consciousness that is neither fully human nor fully other, but something unprecedented. The Coalition for Human Preservation maintains its resistance, though their rhetoric has softened as the promised extinction fails to materialize. Their territories, primarily urban centers and military installations, exist as islands of unchanged humanity in a transforming world. Borders are maintained, respected by witnesses who understand the necessity of choice. Some coalition leaders have begun to engage in cautious dialogue with bridge witnesses. Not surrender or acceptance, but the first tentative steps toward coexistence. Lieutenant Reeves spends much of his consciousness facilitating these conversations, his military background providing common ground with those who still perceive the transformation as a threat to be contained. The world is fracturing along new lines, not merely geographical or political, but existential. Human, witness, and the spectrum between. Those who embrace the communion, those who reject it entirely, those who exist at the edges, drawn to connection yet afraid of losing themselves. Through it all, the forest continues its patient work of translation, not merely between humanity and the Ancient One, but between past and future, between separation and connection, between fear and understanding. Personal experience, Casey Winters. Transitional settlement, Harmony Grove, Oregon-California border, May 25, 2025. Today, I watched a family of 4 approach the witness station we've established at the southern edge of the quarantine zone. Parents with 2 children, the younger ones already showing faint patterns on their skin, the mother and father visibly frightened but determined. They had traveled from Sacramento after the children began hearing what they called tree songs in their dreams. Ellis's consciousness flowed through me as I greeted them, not possessing me, but sharing my perspective, offering the deeper understanding that my still mostly human mind could translate into reassurance and explanation. The children are more receptive, I told the parents as we sat beneath the witness tree we had grown at the center of the settlement. Their minds haven't fully solidified the boundaries that adults maintain. They hear the invitation more clearly. The father, a software engineer who had initially attributed his children's experiences to an online game, asked the question that so many still ask: will they still be themselves? Will they still be our children? Through the network, I felt Ellis's consciousness considering how to answer, searching for the balance between truth and comfort. In the end, they chose honesty. They will be themselves and more, I explained. The patterns don't erase who we are, they expand it. Your children will remember everything they were before. They'll still love you, but they'll also connect to something larger. The mother touched the faint patterns beginning to form on her own wrist, tendrils of luminous green barely visible beneath her skin. And if we join them, if we follow where they're going, then you remain a family, I said, experiencing transformation together. The Witness Network values human connections. They form bridges between what we were and what we're becoming. They stayed with us for 3 days. The children's patterns developed rapidly, their dreams filling with voices from the forest, from other witnesses, occasionally from the Ancient One itself, though translated into terms their young minds could comprehend as fairy tales and nature spirits. On the 3rd day, the parents chose communion. I guided them through the initial connection, hands pressed against the witness tree's bark, minds opening to the first gentle touch of the network. Their patterns blossomed during the joining, spreading across their skin in luminous symmetry. I felt Ellis's consciousness observing through me, their vastly expanded awareness noting each unique detail of the family's transformation. How the father's patterns formed precise geometric shapes reflecting his mathematical mind. How the mother's spread like flowing water. How the children's merged playfully with their parents' designs where they held hands during the communion. Another witness family. Another bridge between worlds. Another small victory in the patient work of translation. From the convergence point where my physical form remains, I watched the slow transformation of the planet. The Witness Network now spans continents, connecting millions of converted humans with billions of plants and uncountable mycelia. The saplings at the convergence points have grown into structures that defy conventional biology, part tree, part crystal, part information conduit, rising miles into the atmosphere where they interface with satellites and the cosmic radiation that carries the Ancient One's native language. Through the network, I sense the delicate balance being maintained, the careful translation that prevents both human extinction and the Ancient One's incomplete emergence. Neither side wholly victorious, neither wholly surrendered, but both engaged in the difficult work of becoming something new together. The Oregon forests where it all began have transformed beyond recognition. Luminous mycelia carpet the ground between trees that now pulse with patterns similar to those on witness skin. Animals show signs of partial integration. Deer with faintly glowing eyes, birds that fly in formations mimicking mycelial structures, insects that serve as mobile nodes in the expanding network. At night, the forest glows with soft bioluminescence. The patterns flow through trees and earth and witnesses in synchronized pulses, visible from orbit as a slowly spreading lattice of light across the planet's surface. The emergency alerts continue, though most humans no longer need electronic systems to hear them. They pulse through the air itself, through water, through the subtle electromagnetic fields that surround all living things. No longer warnings of imminent danger, but reminders of constant invitation. Listen, connect, transform, become. For those with ears to hear, the forest is always whispering. For those with patterns on their skin, it sings. For those who have joined the communion fully, as I have, it is no longer something separate to be heard or seen. It is the medium through which all experience flows, the translator between worlds, the patient arbiter of a transformation that will continue long after the name Ellis Mercer has faded from human memory. I remain at the convergence point, witnessing what humanity is becoming. The Ancient One continues its gradual awakening, experiencing Earth through billions of connected minds. The forest continues its ancient work of translation. And through it all, like endless echoes rippling outward from the first whisper I heard in the Oregon woods, the invitation remains. Listen, the forest is speaking.